as for Mrs. Clinton, look, after all she's done for us and all she's suffered on our behalf, she feels she's owed the presidency. And, you know, who could possibly disagree? Her life is meaningless if she doesn't get at least a shot. And one can only sympathize. Unless you think, as I do, that people should be distrusted who are running for therapeutic reasons. Because the presidency doesn't calm those demons, as her husband has already proved. But look, the reason why we have to think about it, the reason why your question is a good one, is this. What else can the Democrats do? And if that's the case, what hell shape are we in?
I have a lifetime of experience that I will bring to the White House. I know Senator McCain has a lifetime of experience that he will bring to the White House. And Senator Obama has a speech he gave in 2002.
Does anybody at this table believe that the Clintons would prefer Barack Obama to be the next president and be nominated twice in a row, this time and the next time, or have John McCain serve one term and keep it open for Hillary? Does anybody really think that anybody in the Clinton family wants Barack Obama to be the hero of our time in the Democratic Party, replacing the Clintons? Does anybody believe they're that sacrificial?
Well,
Pat,
no.
Do you believe that?
No, I think they'd prefer to
They
see...
want to win, or they want the other guy to lose.
Pundits and news celebrities on the airwaves engaged in fevered speculation about whether the wife of a former president will run for office, and this after the mediocre son of another president spent 8 years in the White House, and whether or not she will possibly face a nominee who is the brother of one president and the son of another. The capture of political and economic power by a tiny cobble of elites is characteristic of the twilight of all empires, including ancient Rome, where a small group of oligarchic families exchanged power among themselves as civic institutions became a farce and the state disintegrated under mounting repression, corruption, and the folly of endless war.
If Iraq is to have weapons of mass destruction today, Iraq would have needed to reconstitute its production capability. Weapons of mass destruction are not produced in caves, they're not produced in basements, they aren't pulled out of a black hat like a rabbit at a magic show. It is science, it is technology, there is an infrastructure that would need to be reconstituted before Iraq could have these weapons, and this reconstitution is imminently detectable by the intelligence services of the United States and other nations that are focused and concerned on Iraq. And the fact that no credible, factually based information has been brought forward to substantiate allegations of Iraq's continued possession or attempts to reacquire weapons of mass destruction today means that we have to look very carefully at these allegations. We cannot go to war based upon rumor.
In the 4 years since the inspectors left, intelligence reports show that Saddam Hussein has worked to rebuild his chemical and biological weapons stock, his missile delivery capability, and his nuclear program. He has also given aid, comfort, and sanctuary to terrorists, including al-Qaeda members. It is clear, however, that if left unchecked, Saddam Hussein will continue to increase his capacity to wage biological and chemical warfare and will keep trying to develop nuclear weapons. Should he succeed in that endeavor, he could alter the political and security landscape of the Middle East, which, as we know all too well, affects American security. President Bush's speech in Cincinnati and the changes in policy that have come forth from the administration since they first began broaching this issue some weeks ago have made my vote easier. Even though the resolution before the Senate is not as strong as I would like in requiring the diplomatic route first and placing highest priority on a simple, clear requirement for unlimited inspections, I will take the President at his word that he will try hard to pass a UN resolution and will seek to avoid war if at all possible.
there's a very strong message that is being sent with this vote against the resolution. And that message is that all across this land, Americans are insisting on a peaceful resolution.
At a time when this country has a $6 trillion national debt and a growing deficit, we should be clear that a war and a long-term American occupation of Iraq could be extremely expensive. Fifth, I am concerned about the problems of so-called unintended consequences. Who will govern Iraq when Saddam Hussein is removed? And what role will the U.S. play in an ensuing civil war that could develop in that country? Will moderate governments in the region who have large Islamic fundamentalist populations be overthrown and replaced by extremists? Will the bloody conflict between Israel and the Palestinian Authority be exacerbated? And these are just a few of the questions that remain unanswered.
This is fantasy land. We're talking about ending the war. My God, we're just starting a war right today. There was a vote in the Senate today. Joe Lieberman, who authored the Iraq resolution, has authored another resolution, and it is essentially a fig leaf to let George Bush go to war with Iran. And I want to congratulate Biden for voting against it, Dodd for voting against it, and I'm ashamed of you, Hillary, for voting for it. You're not going to get another shot at this, because what's happened, if this war ensues, we invade, and they're looking for an excuse to do it. And Obama was not even there to vote.
Senator Clinton, I want to give you a chance to respond.
There was one constitutional scholar on our program who wondered if the vote by itself might not constitute a kind of declaration or even act of war. Do you think it's one of those?
Absolutely not. And I think people have either misunderstood or decided to misrepresent the meaning of that vote.
You said that Senator Clinton was trying to sound Republican, trying to vote Republican on national security issues, and that was, quote, bad for the country and ultimately bad for the Democrats.
Even some of the most conservative Republicans in the Senate, like John Kyle, the senator from Arizona, has already praised her.
As has Henry Kissinger, if you want that kind of praise.
I have had the opportunity to run a big agency. I was very flattered when Henry Kissinger said I ran the State Department better than anybody had run it in a long time.
Well, Henry Kissinger, whose real name is Heinz Kissinger, after all, he's probably the most prominent unindicted war criminal roaming around today. It's just kind of surreal with the coup attempt in Ecuador that this looks like it's hearkening back to Kissinger's policies in Latin America, which saw the overthrow and murder of Salvadore Allende in Chile, the Kissinger's prompting of the creation of Operation Condor and Plan Mercurio, which saw people being disappeared and kidnapped from various Latin American countries, leftist activists. And now we have Hillary Clinton praising Kissinger to the nines.
A conference was held to discuss last month's assassination of Berta Cáceres, recipient of one of the world's top environmental prizes. Her death caused many to re-examine her repeated criticism of the role Hillary Clinton played in the 2009 military coup in Honduras. Cáceres is the latest among hundreds of indigenous activists who have been killed since the right-wing coup, with Honduras becoming one of the world's most dangerous countries. Many say it's yet another regime created by the United States which destroys grassroots social movements in order to defend American business interests.
The history of the region is filled with examples of American pressure on progressive social leaders. This creates the idea that maybe Berta Cáceres was directly assassinated by those linked to the geopolitical interests of the United States and Mexico.
Almost immediately after the coup, the new regime awarded U.S. companies dozens of lucrative concessions in mining, agriculture, and hydroelectric dams. Clinton even extended vast amounts of military aid despite the increasing violence.
So many multinational corporations which are exploiting the natural resources of Honduras are from the United States and even directly linked with Hillary Clinton. Honduras needs to examine the alternative models provided by Ecuador or Bolivia.
It must be very nerve-wracking if you're president to have a Secretary of State who you know is thinking about 4 years ahead or maybe 8 all the time. Never thinks about anything else, never has thought about anything else. accept the possibility that she might one day be president of the United States, wasn't even a team player in her own husband's administration. Remember, when Les Aspin wanted to do something finally about Sarajevo and the rape of Bosnia, Hillary Clinton said, no, I don't want you intervening. You'll get in the way of my health care plan, which you remember worked out so brilliantly. Someone who simply cannot think about anything but her own ego, or sometimes her husband's.
Our goal is not to deter or contain ISIS, but to defeat and destroy ISIS. A more effective coalition air campaign is necessary, but not sufficient. And we should be honest about the fact that to be successful, airstrikes will have to be combined with ground forces actually taking back more territory from ISIS. We should also work with the coalition and the neighbors to impose no-fly zones that will stop Assad from slaughtering civilians and the opposition from the air.
If this war is allowed to continue on until the next after the presidential election, when we have a new president here, as you said, whether it's Hillary Clinton, Marco Rubio, Chris Christie, or some of the other candidates who are running for president, they're all advocating for a no-fly zone, which would directly start a Russia-U.S. war.
I know I should answer the question that is on very many of your minds, and that is, how did a nice Republican girl from Park Ridge go wrong? I was a Goldwater girl. I mean, really, we used to wear, you know, little banners which said Goldwater girl.
You voted against the Civil Rights Act in 1964. Would you do so today?
I would have to vote against it. This isn't something, by the way, that you make a determination on from the standpoint of politics. I have no question that had I voted for that bill, I might have softened some of the Negro opposition to my candidates.
The same Confederate flag Bree Newsom took down from above the South Carolina State House represents the exact same slave-owning and traitorous Confederacy for which Bill Clinton signed a resolution stating that the highest star on the Arkansas flag represented. To this day, they still have an official Confederate Flag Day. And not only did Bill and Hillary never say anything about this, but for 12 years, they celebrated the Confederacy too. I wouldn't want to talk about my past either if I were them.
I think as more Americans focus on the fact that this bill would have put more police on the street, would have locked up violent offenders so they never could get out again, would have given more prison construction money available to the states and as well as the federal government.
Right now, in our biggest cities and our smallest towns, there are boys and girls being tucked gently into bed. And right now, there are parents despairing about gang members and drug pushers on the corners in their neighborhoods. Right now, there are parents questioning a popular culture that glamorizes sex and violence, smoking and drinking.
We need to take these people on. They are often connected to big drug cartels. They are not just gangs of kids anymore. They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we have to bring them to heel.
And a wave of punitiveness swept over the United States, and soon Congress was passing harsh mandatory minimums for possession of small amounts of crack cocaine and other drugs, sentences harsher than murderers receive in some other Western democracies. And soon, Democrats began competing with Republicans to prove they could be even tougher on them than their Republican counterparts. And so it was President Bill Clinton who escalated the drug war far beyond what his Republican predecessors even dreamed possible. And it was President Clinton that championed laws denying federal financial aid to drug offenders for college. It was President Clinton who championed laws banning people with criminal convictions from access to public housing so that people wouldn't have housing upon release from prison. It was the Clinton administration that championed laws denying even food stamps under federal law to people who were once caught with drugs. To a large extent, the basic architecture of this new caste system was championed by a Democratic administration desperate to win back the so-called white swing voters, the folks who had defected from the Democratic Party in the wake of the civil rights movement.
Senator Hillary Clinton is coming under criticism for racially charged comments she's made to the press to press her case for staying in the contest. In an interview with USA Today, Clinton said she would be the stronger candidate because she appealed to more voters. Clinton cited an Associated Press article that discussed, in her words, quote, how Senator Obama's support among working, hardworking Americans, white Americans, is weakening again, and how whites in both states who had not completed college were supporting me. There's a pattern emerging here, she said.
The Bob Kerrey apparent attack on Obama. First it was, he says to reporters after endorsing Hillary Clinton, the fact that his name is Barack Hussein Obama, his father was a Muslim, his paternal grandmother was Muslim. So he says he means this as a compliment. Then the next day he goes on CNN and says, some people say he's the, quote, Islamic Manchurian candidate who went to a secular madrasa. Why the hell would you bring that up unless you wanted to reinforce in voters' minds this guy is a Muslim? Osama Obama, get it?
Well, that's clearly what he wants to do. This is very
You think so? There's no question.
No question, mind. This is clever and Clintonian, a way to bring down Obama.
Asked if her continuing fight for the nomination against Senator Obama hurts the Democratic Party, she replied, quote, I don't, because again, I've been around long enough. You know, my husband did not wrap up the nomination in 1992 until he won the California primary somewhere in the middle of June, right? We all remember Bobby Kennedy was assassinated in June in California. You know, I just don't understand it. You know, there's lots of speculation about why it is. You actually use the word assassination in a time when there is a fear, unspoken but vivid and terrible, that our again troubled land and fractured political landscape might target a black man running for president.
Will you talk about corporate greed? The gun manufacturers sell guns to make as much money as they can make.
A newly identified Pentagon document reveals that in 2012, the year of the Sandy Hook massacre, Secretary Clinton approved $120 million in international sales for the companies that made the Sandy Hook murder weapons.
Over the years when Hillary Clinton ran the State Department, the U.S. government brokered more than $165 billion worth of arms deals with 20 countries, and most of these countries have in fact donated money to the Clinton Family Foundation. The companies, the U.S. companies, defense contractors, and companies like Boeing have also been lobbying their interests with the State Department, and they've also donated money to the foundation.
Compared to her Bush predecessor, Condoleezza Rice, Clinton increased U.S. arms sales by 80%. In 2012 alone, these approvals included more than $300 million of gun and ammunition sales, lucrative deals for a range of gun and ammunition manufacturers, including some known to fund the National Rifle Association. These Clinton-approved deals included a $4 million sale for Remington, the maker of the AR-15 semi-automatic rifle used by Adam Lanza to kill 20 children and 5 adults at the Sandy Hook Elementary School. Clinton also approved $116 million of ammunition sales for Alliant Tech Systems, the maker of the rifle Lanza used to kill his mother, and a major manufacturer of AR-15 ammunition. Overall, Clinton approved $300 million of global sales for 12 gun and ammunition companies. These companies invested some of their Clinton-approved profits into the NRA, and the NRA spent that money on lobbying Congress, outspending the Brady campaign to end gun violence by 73-1 in 2012.
The companies which had brokered their deals through the State Department when Hillary Clinton was running it had also paid $2.5 million for speeches made by Hillary's husband, the former president, Bill Clinton. And this has sparked concerns among many whether this may have violated the U.S. Constitution, because it says openly that no U.S. Government official may take donations or contributions or gifts from any other bodies or any other foreign governments while at office.
John, according to the Sunlight Foundation and The Intercept, you're hosting a fundraiser for Secretary Clinton in Washington, along with several lobbyists who work for firms that lobby on behalf of Goldman Sachs, the NRA. Isn't this kind of fundraiser exactly the kind of thing that drives supporters to Bernie Sanders?
Well, look, I think we're trying to raise the resources that are necessary.
I know some of the parents from Sandy Hook. I want people in this audience to think about what it must feel like to send off your first grader, little backpack maybe on his or her back, and then the next thing you hear is that somebody has come to that school using an automatic weapon, an AR-15, and murdered those children.
If there is one message that echoes forth from this conference, let it be that human rights are women's rights and women's rights are human rights once and for all.
Remember that case where I represented that guy? It was a fascinating case. It was a really interesting case. This guy was accused of raping a 12-year-old. Prosecuted years ago. He had a guy raped. The guy wanted a woman for him. I knew it as a favor to him. Of course, he claimed that he did all this stuff. He took a lie detector test. I had to tolerate, which he passed, which forever destroyed my faith.
How did it turn out?
Oh, he plea bargained. He got him off. It was time served in the county jail. He'd been in the county jail about 2 months.
This girl was allegedly raped and beaten by 2 men living in her parents' home. The second man just didn't happen to be accused. Hillary Clinton took the case, and so people are going to say inevitably, who is the real Hillary Clinton? She's got a very distinct Southern drawl on this tape, which she no longer has today. She took on a case where she believed her client probably raped this young woman. The young woman was in a coma. She was in a hospital. She did many, many years of physical therapy. She ended up drug addicted, never married, no children. She is speaking out now, and she's saying, Hillary Clinton ruined my life.
It is a violation of human rights when individual women are raped in their own communities. It is a violation of human rights when a leading cause of death worldwide among women ages 14 to 44 is the violence they are subjected to in their own homes by their own relatives.
Juanita Broderick's story begins in 1978. She was a registered nurse who had started her own nursing home in Van Buren, Arkansas. Bill Clinton was the state attorney general who was running for governor.
I believe the people expect me to be ready to be governor if I'm elected.
Broderick, whose married name at the time was Juanita Hickey, says she was so impressed with Clinton she volunteered to hand out bumper stickers and signs, her first and only political campaign. Broderick says she met Clinton for the first time when he made a campaign stop at her nursing home in the spring of 1978.
And then all of a sudden, he turned me around and started kissing me. Then he tries to kiss me again. And the second time he tries to kiss me, he starts biting on my lip. Just a minute. He starts to bite on my top lip, and I try to pull away from him. And then he forces me down on the bed. And I just was very frightened. And I tried to get away from him, and I told him no. And I didn't want this to happen. He wouldn't listen to me.
The minute they came in the door, I'm standing over in the living room area, and I see them come through the kitchen area, and I see her going up to someone, and they're pointing at me. And she came over to me, took a hold of my hand, and said, I've heard so much about you, and I've been dying to meet you. And she said, I just want you to know how much that Bill and I appreciate what you do for him. I said, well, thank you, and I started to turn and walk away. This woman that seemed very unassertive, took a hold of my hand and squeezed it and said, "Do you understand everything that you do?" I could have passed out at that moment. And she was just holding on to my hand. She didn't, because I had started to turn away from her. And she held on to my hand and she said, "Do you understand everything that you do?" I mean, cold chills went up my spine. That's the first time I became afraid of that woman.
I guess a real cynic could say, well, why in the world would we pay attention to what Bill Cosby's accusers are saying, but pay no attention to what Juanita Broaddrick is saying? And you gotta kind of think, well, yeah. You mean to tell me that she is totally discarded? She has no credibility whatsoever, and she's a 73-year-old woman, and nobody's supposed to pay attention to her? And Hillary's in this story, too.
I want to send a message to every survivor of sexual assault. Don't let anyone silence your voice. You have a right to be heard, and you have a right to be believed. We're with you.
The truth is, I loved him. Yes, I was Bill Clinton's lover for 12 years. And for the past 2 years, I have lied to the press about our relationship to protect him. Sam, if somebody's willing to pay you $130,000 or $170,000 to say something, and you get your 15 minutes of fame, and you get your picture on the front page of every newspaper, and you're some failed cabaret singer who doesn't even have much of a resume to fall back on, and what's there she's lied about. You know, that's the daughter of Willie Horton, as far as I'm concerned. It's the same kind of attempt to keep the real issues of this country out of the mainstream debate where they need to be.
In that first term, Hillary Clinton was an entirely different woman from the one you see now. She looked different. She insisted on using her maiden name.
She just was seemingly somewhat contemptuous and not willing to make much of an effort to adapt to some sort of politically acceptable appearance or style.
But then her husband got defeated.
Then he got beat.
You were first lady, but you kept your maiden name.
But after the 1980 election, a number of people said to me that it really bothered them. And so I decided that I would, add Clinton and go by Hillary Rodham Clinton.
It was a political decision.
It was a personal decision, but it was prompted by political consideration.
And just remember, there's a special place in hell for women who don't help each other.
So the news yesterday, among other things, you have now got the former First Lady, the overwhelming favorite to be the next Democratic nominee for president, now weighing in on behalf of your opponent, doing robocalls. What is your reaction when you find out that Hillary Clinton is trying to help out Andrew Cuomo to beat you?
I have to be honest with you. When I heard the news, I know this sounds a little backwards, but I was really happy. And you said earlier he was middle of the road. He's not middle of the road. He's a Reagan trickle-down Republican.
The son of Mario Cuomo, you're saying?
He is. If you look at what he has fought for, he's taken billions of dollars from public education and instead fought for tax giveaways for big banks, tax giveaways for millionaires, tax giveaways for some companies, and those companies tend to be his donors. I mean, he's really a trickle-down Republican.
Koza, a former Navy communications specialist on the USS Kitty Hawk for 3.5 years, had his whole life turned upside down when it was found out that he was gay.
It was very horrifying at first, but after a while, I just calmed down, just got myself together and called home, told them the situation. When I was on duty, I was doing my job. When I was off duty, it was my life. What I did was my life. It was my private life.
He has adopted a version of the policy known as don't ask, don't tell.
It is the best way to proceed because it provides a sensible balance between the rights of the individual and the needs of our military to remain the world's #1 fighting force.
The new Clinton policy states homosexual conduct is incompatible with military service.
Was your husband's decision to allow this don't ask, don't tell policy to go forward? He was president of the United States. He could have changed it. Was it a mistake?
No, it was an important first step. Don't ask, don't tell was the compromise policy.
Let me ask you this about some domestic issues in New York State. This state's always the social beginnings of so much in this country. People come here, a lot of immigrants. The New York Times recently began posting the celebrations of gay reunions. Not just straight people getting married, but gay people who want to announce their unions. Do you think New York State should recognize gay marriage?
No.
No. Okay.
I believe that marriage is not just a bond, but a sacred bond between a man and a woman. I have had occasion in my life to defend marriage, to stand up for marriage, to believe in the hard work and challenge of marriage.
An April morning on the White River in northwestern Arkansas. The muted light helping craft a beautiful picture. But there is a dark side to these scenes, pollution, which some say threatens to permanently degrade this river and its tributaries. The state's own Pollution Control and Ecology Department last year listed 3,700 miles of Arkansas waterways as threatened by agricultural pollution. In 1990, Governor Clinton appointed a waste runoff task force. There is a dispute over the timing.
I think there's a direct connection between the current emphasis on animal waste and runoff and his bid for the presidency.
Clinton gave a third of the seats to the politically powerful animal agriculture industry, mainly poultry. In Arkansas, poultry is synonymous with Tyson's. Tyson family members are Clinton campaign contributors. John Tyson denies chicken waste has any heavy impact on water quality.
One of Hillary's investments, under the direction of Tyson Foods counselor James Blair, netted almost $100,000 on an initial $1,000 investment, a nearly impossible feat using legal methods.
I can't read their minds or speculate, but I had absolutely no reason to believe that I got any favorable treatment.
Coincidentally, Governor Clinton enacted a number of state regulations allowing Tyson Foods to grow into the largest industry in Arkansas.
Don Tyson put in $600,000-$700,000 all told in all of Bill Clinton's campaign. Guess what he got out of it? He got $10 million. Guess from where? The Arkansas Development Finance Authority. And he never paid a dime for it.
Walmart's opposition to unions was led for decades by labor lawyer John Tate, who after his retirement proudly recalled at this company meeting in 2004 what he said was his favorite phrase.
Labor unions are nothing but blood-sucking parasites living off of the productive labor of people who work for a living.
Hillary Clinton was not present at this Walmart meeting, but Tate was relied on for years to keep unions out at Walmart, including during the 6 years from 1986 to 92, when Clinton was on the Walmart board and Tate was either an executive or a member of the board himself. But nowhere on the tapes of the 4 stockholder meetings Clinton attended during that time did we find any indication she spoke up to defend the role of America's labor unions. And another board member says, nor did she do so in any of the 24 smaller board meetings held during her service. Clinton has since denounced Walmart policies, but at this 1990 stockholders meeting, she seemed to be very much the loyal company woman.
You know, as a shareholder and director of our company, I'm always proud of Walmart and what we do and the way we do it better than anybody else.
But 20 years later, critics say Walmart still lags in promoting women to top jobs. The company is now defending itself in a discrimination lawsuit brought by 1.5 million current and former female employees. As the wife of the then governor of Arkansas, Clinton also took a role in supporting a Buy America program to create American jobs.
One of the reasons we want to buy America is because we love America.
But as I reported at the time for NBC News in 1992, Walmart continued to get most of its products from overseas during its Buy America program, including from this factory in Bangladesh that used 11 and 12-year-old girls. Some of the foreign-made clothing was later found to be sold under Made in America signs in Walmart stores.
Made in Korea, made in China.
All at a time that Hillary Clinton served on the Walmart board.
You tell a story that, to me, illustrates what has happened to our political system in regard to the middle class, in regard to democracy in the country as a whole, and it involves Hillary Clinton.
Mrs. Clinton stood up. She said, let's get our picture taken, which we did,
And she said, Professor Warren, we've got to stop that awful bill, referring to this bankruptcy bill that's sponsored by the credit card companies. And when Mrs. Clinton came back with a little better understanding of how it all worked, they reversed course, and they reversed course fast. And in her autobiography, Mrs. Clinton took credit for that veto, and she rightly should. One of the first bills that came up after she was Senator Clinton was the bankruptcy bill. This is a bill that's like a vampire. It will not die, right? There's a lot of money behind it. And
the bill her husband had vetoed.
Her husband had vetoed it very much at her urging.
And?
She voted in favor of it.
So what does this mean, though, to these people, these millions of people out there whom the politicians cavort in front of as favoring the middle class and then are beholden to the powerful interests that undermine the middle class? What does it say about politics today?
You know, this is the scary part about democracy today. We're talking again about the impact of money.
One of the things that Senator Sanders points to and a lot of your critics point to is you made 3 speeches for Goldman Sachs. You were paid $675,000 for 3 speeches. Was that a mistake? I mean, was that a bad error in judgment?
Look, I made speeches to lots of groups. I told them what I thought. I answered questions.
But did you have to be paid $675,000?
Well, I don't know. That's what they offered. So,
Secretary Clinton, the question was about the transcripts of the speeches to Goldman Sachs.
Yes.
Why not release them?
I have said, look, there are certain expectations when you run for president. This is a new one, and I've said if everybody agrees to do it, because there are speeches for money on the other side, I know that.
You're running now for the Democratic nomination.
Right.
And it is your Democratic opponent and many Democratic voters who want to see those transcripts. It's not about the Republicans at this point.
And let's set the same standard for everybody. When everybody does it, okay, I will do it.
Senator Clinton, Senator Obama said that you did say in 2004 that on balance NAFTA has been good for New York and America. You did say that. When President Clinton signed this bill, and this was after he negotiated 2 new side agreements for labor and environment, President Clinton said it would be a force for economic growth and social progress. You said in '96 it was proving its worth as free and fair trade. You said that in 2000 it was a good idea that took political courage. So your record is pretty clear. For a week now, Senator Clinton has bashed Senator Obama and even possibly won votes based on the story that Obama had publicly railed against NAFTA, while a memo by a Canadian diplomat claimed Obama's campaign secretly assured them his stand, quote, should be viewed as more about political positioning than a clear articulation of policy plans. In our 4th story on the countdown, Obama's advisor denied speaking those words, and now we learn that a much higher source from Canada revealed late last month that the NAFTA promises came from a very different source, the Clinton campaign. According to an unnamed source speaking to that nation's equivalent of the Associated Press, the Canadian press, it was Clinton's campaign that contacted the Canadian government to reassure them about Clinton's anti-NAFTA rhetoric. The Canadian press reporting that the source heard the chief of staff to Canada's prime minister say in a room full of television journalists, quote, someone from Clinton's campaign is telling the embassy to take it with a grain of salt. Someone called us and told us not to worry.
The trade issue actually fits in with a whole bunch of changes. Over the last decade, she shifted her position on same-sex marriage, on immigration, on NAFTA, on the Iraq War, on Cuba policy, on criminal justice reform, just a few that she's done recently. These all fit, and they're all to the left, all to the progressive side of things. How should progressives believe these are changes of conviction and not simply changes of convenience because the Democratic electorate has changed?
The so-called TPP will lower barriers, raise standards, and drive long-term growth across the region. It will cover 40% of the world's total trade and establish strong protections for workers and the environment.
I urge my colleagues to reject the TPP and stop an agreement that would tilt the playing field even more in favor of big multinational corporations and against working families. You know, much of the debate over this trade agreement has been described as a fight over America's role in setting the rules of international trade. But this is a deliberate diversion. In fact, the United States has free trade agreements with half of the TPP countries. Most of the TPP's 30 chapters don't even deal with traditional trade issues. No, most of TPP is about letting multinational corporations rig the rules on everything from patent protection to food safety standards, all to benefit themselves.
Clinton's announcement yesterday that she opposes the Trans-Pacific Partnership isn't the first time she's broken with the Obama administration so far in this campaign. This week, she called the president's immigration policies into question. Last week, she proposed doing away with the Affordable Care Act's so-called Cadillac tax, aligning herself with organized labor. And last month, she came out against the Keystone XL pipeline, which the administration hasn't yet decided on. Jeremy Peters, some might say this is just someone who will say whatever it takes to get elected and has absolutely no positions that she really believes in. The Democrats have shifted to the right as well. Today's mainstream Democrats are pretty much what used to be called moderate Republicans. Somebody like Eisenhower, for example, would be considered way out on the left. So, for example, Eisenhower strongly made it very clear, as he put it, that anyone who questions the programs of the New Deal is just not part of American political life. Well, by now that's a left-wing program. It's basically Bernie Sanders' program.
Am I hearing you correctly? You think Bill Clinton was a better president than George W.
Well,
Bush?
in some ways. In other ways, I mean, he wasn't an exemplar.
Yeah.
But as far as the growth of government, the increase in spending on restrictive regulations, it was 2.5 times under Bush that it was under Clinton.
So is it possible another Clinton could be better than another Republican?
It's possible. It's possible.
You couldn't see yourself supporting Hillary Clinton, could you?
Well, we would have to believe her actions would be quite different than her rhetoric. Let me put it that way.
We know big government does not have all the answers. We know there's not a program for every problem. We know and we have worked to give the American people a smaller, less bureaucratic government in Washington. And we have to give the American people one that lives within its means. The era of big government is over.
After leaving Maine South, I went to Wellesley, still a Republican, but a different kind of attitude and a different sort of inquiry about what it was I believed. And then gradually over time in college and law school, I evolved my own political beliefs, which frankly are in some ways neither easily defined. They're not dogmatically Republican, dogmatically Democrat, easily defined as liberal or conservative.
She's a doubleheader. She's a militarist and she's a corporatist. It's Wall Street and the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about. The worst possible combination. What we've got to do is not focus on the elections right now. Just focus on changing the incumbents by an unstoppable left-right alliance.